Hey Kevin, so the Jabra Elite 75Ts just got active noise cancelling. Why would anyone bother buying the 85Ts?
Well, that's a good question, Rowan. Stay tuned for a real conversation. Goedendag, we're DHRME.
Definitely hear, remember, make excellence.
All right, let's start with the active noise cancelling. As we started this introduction, so the 75Ts come with noise cancelling, and they came with noise cancelling through a software update. And so getting some theory out of the way, the 75Ts don't come with any sliders in the app.
No.
Whereas the 85T do, meaning that you can adjust the level of noise cancelling with the 85Ts. And another important thing to note is that with the 75Ts, you have to go through this one-time optimization process with this weird grid thing to get the optimal noise cancelling for you. So moving on to the experience, Rowan.
Yeah, so we tested them in 3 different conditions. So on the bike in windy conditions, it was quite interesting. I think both these performed okay. I could hear the wind on both. So that was all right, even with maximum active noise cancelling on.
And did the open design, the semi-open design of the 85Ts make any difference?
No, I don't think it was windier because of that. What was really clear is when we did the flight cabin and the cafe test, the 85T clearly beat the 75T. So the overall attenuation was much better on the 85T. That means the levels were much lower on the 85T. I did find that the higher frequencies were much better cancelled out by the 85T and the lower frequencies less so. So the 75T's ANC, are they any good? Well, they're all right. They're much better than just a passive seal, which is what was originally in the box. So I think any free upgrade like that you would take. But the 85T is really where it's at if you want really good noise cancellation in between these 2 devices. And since the whole ANC thing is a bit new, I think the apps are still struggling a bit. There are a few bugs, like the 85T would always revert to the middle position instead of max noise cancelling, which I preferred. Hopefully these will be ironed out over time.
Talking about sound quality, they definitely sound different. Let's start off by saying that neither of them support aptX. And if we're talking about volume, the 85T is definitely louder than the 75T by a couple of volume stops.
Yeah, and that probably is because of the driver size on the 85T compared to the 75T. So you have 12mm versus 6mm drivers. It's quite an engineering achievement. But what does that mean in terms of sound? So let's get one thing out of the way. With both the Jabras, I'm not a fan of how the mid treble region sounds. So things like fingers sliding over steel strings or hi-hats, I don't prefer how they sound on the Jabras. But having gotten that out of the way, let's start with the bass. I really noticed that there was definitely more presence in the mid bass for the 85Ts. So an instrument like a classic bass guitar is much more audible. However, for some reason, the 75Ts did better on the sub bass. So the lowest end frequencies on bass, the 75Ts performed a bit better, and I actually prefer the bass in the 75Ts. So if you look at a song like James Blake's Before, the bass has a bit more presence on the 85Ts. And the bass guitar has a bit more body to it. The tables turn when you actually listen to classical music. So classical instruments like piano and cellos have more of a timbre to them, and they sound more realistic as compared to the 75Ts, which end up sounding a bit artificial due to the lack of that low end. In terms of sound stays, they're very similar. I tested them with the song Hideaway by Jacob Coulier, and it's a good song test because there's a lot of panning and a lot of instrument positions. I didn't find a major difference between the 2. Overall, I kind of prefer the stock tuning of the 75Ts because the bass and the sub bass have more of a texture to them. But that's where the whole Jabra thing comes into play. You have on-device EQ on both of these buds, which means once you change the EQ, they stay on the buds, and even if you switch to another device, you still get the same EQ settings. So I like these settings for the 75Ts and these settings for the 85Ts.
So Rowan, if you had to pick one of the 2, which one would you pick purely for sound quality?
If I had to really buy, I would buy the 85Ts because they have more powerful drivers, they can get louder, and I think they can probably take EQ changes better than the 75T simply because they are more capable hardware-wise. But there are certain use cases where you would prefer at least what we have, the active 75Ts. So it depends on your taste.
So let's talk about the build and how they feel in the ears. To an unassuming person, you would probably not know the difference between the 2 because they're built very similarly, but there are some differences. So the 75Ts come in an active variant, whereas the 85Ts don't. So the active variant are IP57 rated, and the non-active, so the 85Ts in this case, are IPX4. So what does that mean? The active means that it's dust and water resistant, whereas the IPX4 is only ordinary water splashes and maybe some sweat, but that's it. So it's a clear difference. If you find yourself in, let's say, outdoorsy situations where you're going to get dust particles around your ears, then you might want to go for the active version.
Yeah, and we checked with Jabra. For now, there are no plans to release an Elite Active 85T. That might change in the near future.
A nice aesthetic bonus to the active variant is that it comes in that nice rubberized coating for the case, which is, a good feeling in the hand.
It's very grippy. Another grippy thing is what actually goes into your ears. With the 85T, you get a new design on the ear gels. That's a very long time because
oval is the new circle.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, these fit really well in your ear. I have not had any problems with them falling out, like I've had with almost every other earbud I've put in my ear holes. So the fit is really secure. I can move around without any problems, and they're really comfortable. I've worn them for entire work days, being on calls throughout, and I could do that quite comfortably. Another physical difference which will be very apparent is that the 75Ts are much smaller. Well, they're a little smaller than the 85Ts. So they're also a bit heavier, the 85Ts, so those are the small physical differences. They do stick out a bit more in the pocket, the 85Ts, so if you're really wearing very skinny jeans, maybe you want to stick with the 75Ts. But other than that, we thought they were still a very good size, especially if you compare them to something like the Sonys. And talking about the case, I really like the magnets on the Elite Active 75Ts that we have. They snap into place really easy. I had a little bit of trouble getting the 85Ts into the case on the first attempt because of the design, but it's something you can get used to over time.
So talking about how the 75Ts fared in terms of comfort and secureness of fit, I think there were a couple of mixed feelings here because the way I experienced it was that they were both comfortable and it fit securely in my ear. I would say the secureness was better than the comfort, but I could easily wear them for a couple of hours without any problems. But your feeling was different.
Yeah, and I think I'm in between sizes on the 75Ts. So the problem was either I had to choose for, something that was a bit too big to get the full seal and get the best sound experience, or something that was a bit too small, would stay in my ear, but then I wouldn't get the best out of the sound. So it was always kind of a trade-off for me. Whereas on the 85Ts, I did not have that problem at all. All right, it's Fakman time. Phone calls, how do the 85Ts perform? Well, on paper, they have 2 additional mics. I don't know how they managed to fit any more stuff into buds this small. So we tested this in 3 different environments. A quiet environment, a quiet room, a cafe, sound playing in the background with voices and more unpredictable as well as higher pitch noises, and windy conditions in a very controlled windy environment which we call a fan. Wind blowing in my face. So first line was head on, second line with the left earbud on the wind, third one with the right earbud facing the wind, and the fourth line back head on. So you can see the difference between the different earbuds and where the mics are placed and how that affects call quality.
So have a listen to the samples for yourself, but if you want to hear our conclusion, then jump to that chapter later on.
Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3. Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3. Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3. Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3. Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3. Pop, pop, popsicle, ice, ice, icicle, test, test, testing, 1, 2, 3.
So our conclusion on phone calls on the 75Ts and the 85Ts is that Jabra went with the don't fix it if it ain't broke strategy because they were very, very similar apart from one thing, and that's in suppressing background noise. So unless you find yourself making phone calls with a lot of background noise, you can go wrong with either of these earbuds and have that Fakman confidence you want and need.
And of course, a Fakman also needs good on-device controls. So the controls on the device remain pretty much the same from the 75Ts. There's no big difference. You can mute, you can turn side tone on and off, and you can put the calls on hold, etc. You can customize all of these in the app. However, what you can't do on the buttons is switch to transparency mode. So if you're out and about and you want to talk and you want to also hear your environment, you can't really do that. You have to do that through the app. One of the biggest changes that the 85Ts have over the 75Ts is the semi-open design. And while that might not seem like much on paper, in real life and real use, it makes a huge difference because remember earlier I said I used earbuds all day on calls and even when I was not on calls. And that is possible because of that semi-open design. If you talk with a design which is closed like the 75Ts, you really get this weird hearing yourself through your skull effect called occlusion, and it's just not very comfortable. Whereas with the 85Ts, it feels like you're talking naturally. Now let's talk about windier situations where I was on the bike in the Netherlands. We have to feeds. So I was on the bike and I didn't really notice the semi-open design affecting the sound. So it was not extra windy because of that. So in case you're worried about that, that doesn't happen.
And whether you're cycling around with these earbuds or you're sitting at home, neither of these are going to really win any beauty pageants. Both of them are designed very similarly, like we said, and they are both quite compact and don't really stick out of your ears that much. Even though the buds in the case are slightly bigger, you don't really notice the difference once they're in your ears. And the way you operate either of these buds is with a button on either of the buds. And you can use those buttons, like Rowan said, for different things, whether you're on music, on phone calls. But what's important to realize with these buds is that they come with volume controls. So holding down the right earbud increases volume, holding down the left one decreases volume. Of course, that's all customizable within the app.
Now, one thing that's not changed in the design, and we've got, I think, at least 100 questions till now about, is are they still working on a master-slave architecture? What does that mean? It's your right earbud that connects to your source device like a phone or a laptop, and the left earbud connects to your right earbud. And what's the big deal, you might ask? Well, in practice, it is not that big a deal, but there's a few things that it affects. One, the right bud drains battery faster. So I noticed that both started around the same battery percentage, whereas the right earbud died 20% before the left earbud. Not that great. Second point, the connectivity is not as stable in a master-slave setup as it is with independent earbuds like the AirPods. And third point, you can't share these earbuds with someone who you're close enough to share your earwax with, because the moment you take them beyond a certain distance of each other, they lose connections, or rather the left earbud loses connection. If you're using only one earbud, it has to be the right earbud. Now, this is a big deal for a lot of people. For me, I thought in practice it didn't make much of a difference, but if any of those things fit you, you may not want to go with the Jabras at all.
All right, talking about the extra features, we're going to be done with this section pretty fast, aren't we? There really isn't that much to mention between the two. There is a small thing to mention about the battery life. You get 25 hours total on the 85T versus 24 hours on the 75T. Big deal. But what is a big deal is that the 75Ts, you had to be careful which one you were getting because not all of them came with wireless charging. Whereas on the 85T, it's always by default going to come with wireless charging.
Yeah. And yeah, what else? One small difference I noticed, and I think it was a nice touch, that the 85Ts, as soon as you take them out of the case and place them in your ear, they're already connected. You know, they're much faster to connect, whereas the 75Ts take a couple of seconds more. Yeah, it's really a small difference, but yeah, we're in the world where we compare 1 or 2 seconds, speed gains as huge. So yeah, it's a nice thing that whenever I took the 85T, put them in my ears, they're already set, ready to go, connected to multiple devices. So a lot of things have also remained the same, so we've not really touched upon those, but things like the case design, USB Type-C, and here through with the slider you can control how much you can hear your environment. Those things have remained the same. What else, Kevin?
Yeah, and the fact that they work well with multiple devices.
Yeah.
So you can connect to 8 devices in total and simultaneously to 2 of them. So that really hasn't changed. And another thing that hasn't changed, what sets Jabra apart from the others, is that it has crazy customizability in the app. You can customize stuff from what the button presses do, the equalizer, you have a My Sound feature, which is setting up this sound profile to your liking. You can find your buds, a bunch of useful features within the app.
So the price difference between the 85Ts and the 75T actives is about $30 US and 50 euros here in the Netherlands. But for the latest prices in your region, just check the links in the description. They give you the most updated prices in real time, and using those links will help our channel a little bit. Go help us, why don't you? So, Kevin, why would you buy the 85Ts or the active 75Ts? Why would you choose between one or the other?
So look, this is the reason why you should stick with the 75T actives. Well, active. If you're an active person or you need those active features, so the dust and water proofing, then don't go with the 85Ts. Second reason to stick with the 75Ts is if you don't want that much of a bulge in your jeans pocket. Especially if you're a skinny jeans kind of person, then maybe stick with the 75Ts. Now, if we move on to why you should go with the 85Ts instead, then it's all about that fit and comfort. Those oval ear gels make a huge difference, as well as the semi-open design.
Yeah, and if you're a bass head and you like it loud, I think you can't go wrong with the 85Ts. Wireless charging comes standard on the 85Ts, also very useful and these days more and more used. And of course, ANC. Both of these have ANC, but if you really want to choose one for ANC, it would be the 85Ts. You've been getting that semi-open feeling towards the Jabra Elite 85Ts.
And we've been DHRME.
Namaste.